If you're some kind of professional, you have a degree in law and antennas and science and biology and the life cycle of the Peruvian moth, right? Maybe you're in high demand and you don't have to take minimum wage. Every job you've had has been for multiple times minimum wage. If they offer you minimum wage, you're going to say, no, it doesn't make sense for me. Besides, I can afford to turn this down, even if I don't have anything else in hand. It still makes sense for me, right? So you know what your reservation price is before you walk in there. That's the minimum amount of money you'll take. If they won't give you that much, sorry, can't take it. Then you get up and leave. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense for you. So the first step is to know that. Now they're going to have their reservation price too. Okay, that's the maximum amount they would ever pay you. So if you walk in there and say, I need, $1 million plus 5, $1.5 million, they say, absolutely not. Thank you for your time, right? Because it's above their reservation price, right? So they've got a reservation price and you've got a reservation price. Now, hopefully, there's some space between them, right? If the lowest amount you would take would be, say, 10, and the lowest they would ever pay is 20, or the most they'd ever pay is 20, well, you've got some space between those. You have what they call a zone of possible agreement, ZOPA, where anywhere between 10 and 20, there's room to make a deal. Sometimes you walk into a situation where there is no zone of possible agreement. If you go in there and say, well, the least I would ever take is 20, and they say, going into the negotiation, oh, the most we would ever pay is 10, then it's not possible to have an agreement, right? So sometimes you'll encounter that in the real world. They could never pay you the minimum of what you would ever accept, right? So these are some fundamental concepts. So the idea is that they're going to have their reservation price, you have yours, you know what yours is, and you've resigned yourself before you even begin that I need this, and if I can't get that, sorry, doesn't make sense. Right? You need to know. A lot of people, especially when they're inexperienced, they haven't thought about this before. They go in thinking let's see what they say, And then you walk out of there with something that's really not a good deal. You're working far below your value, or at least what you could have gotten here or other places, right? So that's the idea. Reservation price, everybody should know what that is. Your reservation price, their reservation price. And depending on what those two numbers are, you can have a zone of possible agreement. Okay, so there has to be a zone of possible agreement, or it doesn't make any sense. But you end the process right there. Now the problem is that we know our reservation price, but we don't always know theirs. That's the problem. And they're going to try and keep their reservation price secret from you. They're not going to disclose that. You can try various techniques and say, listen, so what is the budget for this role? Right? They say, how much money do you need? And you say, well, I care more about work challenges and getting along with people. What budget did you have in mind? Things like this, right? And you can try and do things like this that will get them to hopefully reveal their reservation price, even though they probably tell you a lie when they say this is the budget. Anybody who knows what they're doing, they're not going to just disclose it. It's like playing poker. If someone says, can I just see your cards for a second? You say no, right? You see, number one rule of poker. That's actually the first rule in poker. Right? So reservation price, you know yours, but you don't know theirs. That's the challenge, right? What you can do is you can probe. You can basically, God, every time I adjust this brightness, the sun comes out and it ruins everything. From the dawn of time, man has longed to destroy the sun. And someday soon with AI, I think we will finally get there. Let's see. Okay, so we're talking about reservation prices. We're talking about the fact that you know yours, but you don't know theirs. You know what's the minimum you'd accept. You don't know what's the maximum they would ever pay. That's the catch, right? So we do this by probing and saying look, I'm going to need this. And they say, absolutely not. You know what I mean? But then you can sort of get them to come somewhere near that. You're like, okay, obviously that's something that's within their reservation price, right?